told to work harder while funding my brother's life. I said nothing. Let the proof speak. And when I walked away, the golden child's entire future quietly collapsed with the money that propped it up. My name's Matt. I'm 21 now. I grew up in a small town most people would never find unless they got lost on the highway. Our house sat right on top of a hill, big enough that you could see both sides of the land from the front porch. On one side we had chicken houses and a small pasture that our neighbor used for his cows. The other side was mostly open field where we stacked hay and kept some equipment. Across the road was a path that led to the river, which was the only fun part about living there as a kid. It sounds like a perfect childhood setup, and maybe it could have been, except for how things worked inside the house. I've got one older brother, Evan. He's about a year and a half older than me, but if you asked my mom back then, you'd think he was some kind of miracle sent straight from heaven. Every story, every brag, every dollar went into Evan. Me, I was just kind of there. Dad worked in trucking. By the time I can remember, he was dispatching trucks instead of driving them. But the hours were still long. Some nights he wouldn't get home until after 9. He'd eat standing up at the counter, then go straight to bed. He was a good man, but because of those hours, he missed a lot of the stuff that went on when it was just me, Mom, and Evan. Split when I was a sophomore. After that, I rotated 1 week with Mom and 1 week with Dad. I figured out early on that in our house there were 2 sets of rules: Evan's rules and my rules. His rules were short and sweet: do good in sports, don't fail out of school, and smile when Mom wanted to show him off. My rules were longer. Chores had to be done before school, no talking back, no complaining. Keep my grades steady, and if anything went wrong, somehow it was on me. One of the first memories that really locked this in was a broken window. We had an old barn window facing the driveway, and one afternoon Evan was outside tossing a football with his buddy. I was in the shed putting tools back after finishing up the chicken feed run. The ball sails wide, crashes through the window. I didn't even see it happen until Mom came running out yelling my name. I said, "That wasn't me." Evan and Jake were playing ball. Evan just shrugged with that half smile he always used when he knew Mom had his back. Mom turned to me and said, "Matt, why didn't you move the tools so this wouldn't happen? You never think." I tried to argue, but she had already decided. That week's lawn mowing money from the neighbor, $40 I'd saved up, was gone to pay for the glass. Evan got a pat on the shoulder and be more careful next time. Same night, I heard Mom on the phone with one of her sisters bragging about how Evan might get looked at by the high school coach early. She didn't mention me patching feed sacks when the raccoons got into the shed or getting up at dawn to reset the water lines. It was like I was invisible unless something broke, and then suddenly I was the reason. Dad didn't see that part most of the time. He just expected me to handle it. His phrase was, "If the chickens needed feeding, Matt, handle it. If the fence was sagging, handle it." He didn't mean it as a punishment, just that he thought I could, and I could, but it added to the whole picture where I carried weight and Evan carried a ball. I still remember lying in bed that night after the broken window, staring at the ceiling. I had the alarm set for 4:45 a.m. so I could get the feed bins filled before school. My hands were already sore from the work I'd done earlier, but all I could hear was Mom's voice through the wall telling her sister how Evan was so talented and such a blessing. I wondered if she even remembered I'd been out there too, just not playing ball. That night, staring at the ceiling with my knuckles still scraped from pulling nails out of old boards, I realized nobody was going to notice. Not Mom. Maybe not even Dad. But I knew the chickens didn't care who fed them, the fence didn't care who patched it, and the farm wouldn't run itself. So I set the alarm, rolled over, and told myself tomorrow would be the same. And it was. Saturdays weren't days off, they just meant I had more to do. Dad usually left me a short list of repairs before heading out for work. One morning it was the fence. A section was sagging, and he wanted it fixed before the neighbor's calves got any ideas. I was out early with a hammer and some wire. Evan came outside around noon, stretched, and asked if there was any food. Mom called from the porch that he shouldn't lift a finger before his game. He shrugged and went back inside. I finished alone. That was how it usually went. My chores, his free pass. Money followed the same pattern. By the time I was 15, I'd started unloading trucks at Miller's Hardware on weekends. The pay wasn't huge, but it was steady. First week I brought it home. Mom said she needed some for groceries. I gave her 20. Next thing I knew, the whole envelope was gone. A few days later, Evan had new cleats. Mom told me they were for both of you. He wore size 11. I wore size 9. That was the end of it. It didn't stop there. The bank statement on the counter once had my name listed next to a charge at Sport Zone, even though I hadn't bought anything. I didn't even have the card. Mom brushed it off, said it was just how the system listed purchases. The cleats box with Evan's name still sat by the back door. School wasn't much different. I was tired most mornings from starting chores before sunrise. If I nodded off in class, the teacher called home. Next day, the counselor wanted to talk to me about acting out. I never heard of Evan being called in. Even when he skipped assignments, he always had a reason. I never did. At night, Dad would get home late, sometimes close to 10. I tried telling him about the missing money or the new cleats. He sighed, told me to let it go, keep my head down, focus on my own work. That was his way of dealing with it. Meanwhile, Mom kept building up the photo wall in the living room. Evan's side filled up with framed pictures from games, newspaper clippings, and trophies. My side had one faded school photo from years ago, still crooked. Nobody fixed it. By then, I knew better than to leave cash in my room. I started hiding it wherever I could, sometimes under tools in the shed, sometimes under the spare tire in Dad's truck. Not exactly safe, but safer than the kitchen counter. Evan never had to think about hiding money. If he wanted something, Mom got it for him. If I wanted something, I either worked extra hours or did without. The divide was obvious. Evan's days revolved around practices, games, and rides from Mom. Mine revolved around chores, work shifts, and school. He got new gear, new shoes, and excuses. I got told to be more responsible. It wasn't the kind of thing you could argue about. If I brought it up, I was being dramatic. If I stayed quiet, nothing changed. So, I kept working, kept saving, and kept my head down like Dad said. By the end of that school year, Evan had a shelf full of medals and shoes that never touched dirt. I had a half-broken toolbox with a few crumpled bills hidden in it. That's just how it was. It started with a shove in the school hallway. Evan had a habit of bumping into people when he was in a mood. One morning, he clipped some kid's shoulder. Words got exchanged, and before long, they were pushing each other. I stepped in between them trying to stop it, but a teacher came around the corner just as the other kid stumbled backward. To anyone watching, it looked like I'd been the one fighting. We both got called to the principal's office. I sat in the chair across from the desk while Evan leaned back, arms crossed like he had nothing to worry about. Mom showed up about 20 minutes later, out of breath and already frustrated. The principal explained what he saw on the cameras. Evan shoved first, then me in the middle, then the scuffle. He said both of us needed to be careful. Before I could say anything, Mom jumped in. "Matt has been hot-headed lately," she said.
"We've been dealing with it at home."
Evan doesn't start fights. He's focused on sports. This is out of character for him. Even Evan stayed quiet, which was the smart play. The principal nodded, made a note, and suggested I might benefit from a school mentor program. Evan walked out with nothing more than a "be careful next time." When we got back to the parking lot, I asked Mom why she said that. She brushed me off. "It's better for both of you if we just move on." I didn't say anything else. At that point, I realized talking didn't matter. Proof mattered. That night, when I got home, I started taking pictures. First, the cash jar on my dresser. I lined the bills up, took a photo, and put them back. The next day, after school, I checked it again. 20 was missing. Another picture. Mom hadn't said anything, but I didn't need her to. I checked the mail later that week and saw a bank statement Dad left on the counter. There it was in black and white. Sport Zone, $189. The same day, Mom had texted my aunt that she'd picked up new cleats for Matt's gear. I had never set foot in Sport Zone. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo, and folded the paper back exactly how it had been. My folder started filling up. Texts where Mom told my aunt I'd skipped baseball tryouts for gaming when I'd actually been babysitting at her request. Photos of receipts labeled with my name, but clearly for Evan. Screenshots of my bank app showing withdrawals I hadn't made. Nothing dramatic, just a pile of little things that lined up. At dinner, things carried on like usual. Evan got the car keys to head to a study group. I got told to mop the kitchen floor because I had more time. I didn't argue. I just did it and then went back to my room. Before bed, I looked at the folder on my phone. It was small, but it was real. The thought crossed my mind. If anyone ever asked me, I could actually show them. It wasn't just complaining or blaming anymore. It was dates, amounts, and words in their own handwriting. The next day at school, the counselor asked me if everything was okay at home. I told her it was fine. She said the principal had suggested she check in because of the fight. I nodded, kept my answer short, and went back to class. But I knew eventually someone was going to see the difference. On Dad weeks, I came in clean, on time, and awake. On mom weeks, I was half asleep with bags under my eyes. People noticed, even if nobody said it out loud. That weekend, Evan had a game. Mom was in the bleachers yelling his name so loud everyone could hear. I was working the concession stand as part of the school fundraiser shift. She didn't see me once, even though I was there the whole time. When the game ended, she rushed down to hug Evan, snap pictures, and talk to his coach. I walked home on my own after my shift. At the house, I pulled up the receipts again. The Sports Zone charge was still the clearest one. I thought about printing it and pinning it to the fridge just to see what would happen. I didn't, but the idea stayed with me. Later that night, Dad got home late. He sat at the counter with a sandwich, too tired to really talk. I thought about telling him, but I held off. The folder wasn't big enough yet. I wanted it full before I laid it down in front of him, so I kept going. Every time something went missing, every time my name got used for something that wasn't mine, I added it. No speeches, no arguing, just proof. Mom still called me lazy when I dragged in late from Miller's. Evan still got keys to the car. The photo wall in the living room still leaned to one side. All his frames lined up perfect. The only difference was, now I had a record. Baseball was the one thing I thought I could keep for myself. Evan had basketball and football locked down, so I spent months getting ready for baseball tryouts. I practiced throws against the barn wall until the wood was dented, set up targets in the field, and jogged the dirt road in the mornings to build stamina. It wasn't about scholarships or being scouted. I just wanted one thing that was mine. The day of tryouts, I had it planned. Bus ride after school, equipment packed in my bag, quick snack from the cafeteria before heading to the field, nothing complicated. At 2:15, my phone buzzed. Mom texted, "Come home now, need you to watch your cousin for 1 hour. Emergency." I replied, "Tryouts today." "Can't." Her answer came back fast. "Family first, don't argue, be here when I get home." I sat there staring at it. The bus left at 2:25. If I went home, that was it. Tryouts would be over by the time I got back. If I ignored her, I'd hear about it for weeks. I went home. She dropped off my cousin, said she'd be just an hour. By the time she came back, it was after 5. Tryouts had ended at 4. I didn't even bother heading to the field. That night, I brought it up. "You made me miss tryouts." Mom didn't hesitate. "If you really wanted it, you would have planned better. Don't blame me." Evan walked into the kitchen right then. He opened the fridge, pulled out my leftover pasta from the night before, and ate straight from the bowl. Mom didn't say a word. He left the empty dish on the counter and went upstairs. I didn't push it further. I cleaned the bowl, put it away, and went to the shop. The fan belt on one of the coop blowers had snapped earlier. If it stayed down overnight, we'd lose a chunk of birds. I found an old belt, swapped it out, and sliced my palm on the housing. I wrapped it in paper towels and electrical tape and kept working. Later, I cleaned it properly. But in that moment, I just needed to keep the blower running. While I was out there, I kept replaying the text. Family first. That's how she'd worded it. What she meant was Evan first, always me second, unless she needed me to cover something. When I got back inside, she was on the phone telling my aunt I'd skipped tryouts to play games. I stood there listening from the hall, bleeding through the tape, and realized I couldn't stop her from saying it. What I could do was save proof. I pulled out my phone and screenshotted the entire conversation, her demand, my reply about tryouts, her response. Added it to the folder with the Sports Zone receipt and the cash jar photos. It was starting to look like a case file. The next day, Coach caught me in the hall. "Heard you missed tryouts. Rules are rules, but keep working. Maybe next season." I nodded, didn't argue, no point. That weekend, Evan had another game. Mom took him shopping the day before for a new phone case and a hoodie. She told me to mow the yard while they were gone. When they came back, she called me lazy for not bagging the clippings. I went upstairs and opened the folder again. The latest additions were clear. Text thread showing her pulling me out of tryouts. Screenshot of Coach's reply. My Google Maps timeline, I had location history turned on, showing I'd been at home babysitting, at the exact hours tryouts were going on. I didn't know who I'd show it to yet, but I kept saving everything. Dad came home late that night as usual. I thought about laying it all out right then, texts, screenshots, bank statements, but he was sitting at the counter rubbing his temples, eyes half closed. I decided it wasn't time. Instead, I took the envelope of cash from Miller's and moved it again. This time inside an empty toolbox in the shop. I wasn't going to let another week's work vanish for a pair of cleats that didn't fit me. The next morning I woke up early like always, fed the chickens, fixed the latch on the pen and tightened belt again because it squealed overnight. My palm was raw, but the blower worked fine. I left it running and headed back up the hill. Quick pause, fellas. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Thanks so much for your support.
All right, back to the drama.
Walking past the living room, I glanced at the photo wall. Another new frame had gone up. Evan mid-jump, basketball under one arm. Mom must have added it while I was outside. My side stayed the same. One crooked photo from 3 years ago. I didn't stop to straighten it, just kept walking. That was the day I realized it wasn't about the tryout. It was about having proof. Words wouldn't change anything, but dates, charges, texts, they didn't argue back. They just sat there waiting to be shown. And I was getting closer to the point where I was ready to show them. The week after the missed tryout, the school counselor called me in. She had a folder open on her desk and a coffee mug that smelled burnt. She asked if everything was okay at home. I said yes. She leaned back and said she'd noticed I looked different depending on the week. Some weeks I came in on time, hair washed, homework done. Other weeks I looked tired, late, clothes smelling like the chicken houses. She didn't accuse me of anything, just said she wanted to understand. I told her about the 2 houses, how I spent time with Mom one week and Dad the next. She nodded and wrote something down. She asked if I'd like to stay full-time with one parent. I shrugged. She said it might help my grades if I had consistency. Later that day, another staff member pulled me aside. They had the same questions. Nothing dramatic, no threats, just careful notes. They were seeing the difference clear as day. At home that evening, Mom didn't mention anything about the counselor. She probably hadn't been called yet. She was busy bragging on Evan. He'd scored 18 points in the last basketball game. She made him sit at the table and retell every shot while I cleaned up the kitchen. I didn't argue. I just kept adding to the folder. That night, I organized it into categories: money, chores, and lies. Under money, I had photos of the empty cash jar, the Sports Zone receipt, and the bank charges. Under chores, I had texts from Mom telling me to skip tryouts to babysit. Under lies, I had her messages to family about me gaming instead of trying out. By then, it looked like a full file. The next Saturday, I decided to show Dad. He was home in the afternoon for once. We sat at the kitchen table. He had the mail spread out, bills on one side, a stack of receipts on the other. I set my phone down and slid it across. "What's this?" he asked. "Stuff I've been saving," I said. He scrolled through slowly, the Sports Zone charge labeled for Matt Eskier even though I'd never bought a thing there, the babysitting texts, the screenshots of my empty jar, the Google Maps timeline showing I was at home the exact hours tryouts were going on. When he finished, he set the phone face down. "This is enough," he said. That night he changed the password on the joint account he'd let Mom use. He called the bank and had them freeze the card she carried. No shouting, no big fight, just a quiet change. The next morning he asked me straight out, "Do you want to stay here full-time?" I said yes. He nodded. "Okay, we'll set it up. You'll still see your mom, but school nights you're here. That's final."
It felt less like a choice and more like a plan finally being written down.
Later that day, Mom came by. She knocked once, walked in like she still lived there. She went straight to Dad. "Why did the bank freeze my card?" Dad didn't raise his voice. He pointed to the folder on the table. "Because of this." Mom glanced at it but didn't pick it up. "This is dramatic. He's making things up." Dad shook his head. "No, it's all dated. It's all your words. He's staying here now. You can see him on weekends." She looked at me, waiting for me to speak. I didn't. Dad didn't either. She muttered something about me being ungrateful, then left. That night I moved my stuff into the spare room at Dad's place. It wasn't fancy, just a mattress, a dresser, and a desk, but it was mine. I tucked my cash envelope in the drawer, no longer worried about it disappearing. By then Dad had remarried. My stepmom kept things straight. No excuses, no bending rules. She wasn't loud about it, but she didn't let things slide either. The next week at school, the counselor noticed. "You look rested today," she said. I told her I'd be living with Dad now. She smiled, made a note, and said it was a good move. On Friday, Dad wrote out a short list and taped it to the fridge. 3 rules: honesty about money, keep grades steady, and handle your chores without being asked. That was it. No gray areas. That weekend, Evan texted me. You really think you can ditch mom like that? I didn't reply. Another text came through. You're making her look bad. Still, I didn't reply. By Sunday, Mom showed up again. She tried the same speech about family sticking together. Dad didn't budge. He said the arrangement was set. She left angry but calmer than before. Didn't feel like a victory, more like a line finally drawn. That folder I'd been building for weeks was what made it possible. Without it, I would have just been the kid complaining. With it, Dad couldn't ignore what was right in front of him. From then on, the weeks looked different. Mornings started the same: chores, breakfast, school. But the cloud over it was gone. If something went missing, I knew it wasn't my fault. If Evan wanted the spotlight, he could have it. I had what I needed, a place where the rules were the same for everyone. Once I moved in full-time with Dad, the split became obvious. Evan stayed with Mom. I stayed with Dad. Weekends I'd still see her, but school nights were settled. Evan got a car not long after that. A used Civic, silver with a dent in the back bumper. Mom called it a need because he had to get to practices and games. She told anyone who'd listen that she sacrificed for it. When he rolled up at school, kids crowded around. It looked like freedom. To me, it just looked like another thing handed to him. Within a month, the bumper had another scrape. He'd let his buddies take it for a spin, and they'd clipped a mailbox. Mom said the dent was already there. She didn't ask him to pay for repairs. She never would. Meanwhile, I was stacking shifts at Miller's. During the week, I handled school and chores, then Saturdays I worked from morning to late afternoon. $80 cash, sometimes more if I picked up extra hours unloading shipments. I saved for a laptop first. Nothing fancy, just good enough to run programs I needed for school. Then I started saving for a truck. Dad pushed me to write out exactly what I'd fix first: brake pads, new tires, and fluids. He stood in the shop with me while I made the list. He didn't hover, just leaned on the workbench while I went over costs. Get the essentials right, then the extras, he said. That was his way: short sentences, practical advice. Mom kept texting me for help: 20 for groceries, 50 for bills, sometimes just gas money. I had cash, but I stopped handing it over. I'd seen where it went before: cleats, hoodies, fast food. One week she said, "I guess family doesn't mean anything to you." I didn't answer. My phone stayed on the desk while I finished homework. Evan's grades started sliding. He missed assignments, came late to class. Teachers still gave him room because of sports, but after a while even they noticed. One Friday, Coach benched him for a game. Mom told anyone who asked that the refs were biased and the school was against him. Evan laughed it off, but he didn't like it. Back at Dad's, the house ran on clear rules: 3 taped to the fridge, honesty about money, keep grades steady, handle your chores. Nothing else needed to be said. If I left dishes in the sink, I washed them before bed. If I spent money, I told Dad where it went. Simple. Sundays sometimes crossed paths. Evan and I would end up at the same gas station or walking into the diner at the same time. We didn't argue. We didn't really talk either. One afternoon I saw him filling up the Civic. He nodded at me. I nodded back. Later that night he sent a text. "You think you're better now?" I typed a long reply, deleted it, and sent just 2 words: "Not better." He didn't text back. By that point, Mom had started leaning harder on Evan. She asked him for errands, money, rides. He was still golden in her eyes, but he was also her only option at home. He didn't complain to her, but his friends mentioned it at school. "Your brother's always driving her around," one said. I just shrugged. For me, the weeks felt steady. I went from paycheck to paycheck with a plan. Cash in the drawer, expenses listed, truck parts priced out. Dad checked in but didn't hover. He saw me working, saving, and he let me handle it. Evan's highlights kept popping up online: photos of him mid-shot, videos of him driving to the basket. The likes dropped each time. Freshman year he got hundreds. Now it was a couple dozen, mostly the same people. He still posted though, still had Mom cheering from the stands. By spring I bought the truck. Old Ford, paint faded, engine loud, but it ran. I spent Saturdays with the hood up, grease on my hands, fixing the list I'd written months earlier. By summer, it was road ready. Not shiny like Evan's Civic, but reliable. I paid cash, no debt. The split between us was simple. He had things given. I had things earned. Mom still didn't see it that way. She told people Evan was destined for something bigger. She didn't say much about me at all. That was fine. I didn't need her to. One Sunday evening I was leaving Miller's and saw Evan walking in. He was picking up stuff for Mom, cleaning supplies, snacks, whatever she'd sent him for. We passed in the doorway. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept. For the first time, I wondered if being golden didn't feel as good as it looked. Back at Dad's, I put the groceries on the counter and grabbed the list off the fridge. No exceptions. I liked that better than any trophy wall. Graduation day came faster than I thought. Dad and my stepmom were in the stands early, front row on the right side. Mom showed up late, right as the line of caps and gowns was heading toward the field. She waved like nothing had ever happened, pulled her phone out for pictures, and dragged along one of her friends I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Walking across the stage felt simple. No spotlight, no big speech, just a handshake and a diploma folder. I spotted Dad standing, clapping, trying not to look too proud. Mom was yelling Evan's name, even though he wasn't graduating that year. He should have finished the year before me, but he was behind on credits. She just wanted people to hear her. After the ceremony, we took photos. Dad and my stepmom stood with me on one side of the stadium. Mom waited on the other. She finally came over, hugged me quick, then pulled Dad aside. "Can you spot me 20 for gas?" she asked. Dad reached for his wallet. Before he could hand it over, my stepmom put her hand on his arm and said, "No." Mom froze, then gave a tight smile. I stayed calm, said I'd grab food with her after if she wanted. She agreed. We went to Burger King down the road. She ordered a meal that came to almost $15, pulled out cash like it was nothing. I offered to pay, but she waved me off. Then when I got up to refill my drink, she mentioned to her friend that she would have had 20 from Dad if the wife hadn't cut in. I heard it clear. When we left, I gave her a 20 anyway. I told her it was a thank you for showing up. She smiled, pocketed it, and said she'd try to see me more. I didn't expect it that night. My stepmom showed me a screenshot. Mom's friend had posted, "Nice to meet you, but your wife's kind of a bitch." The message had been sent to the email tied to Dad's joint account. She didn't reply. She just blocked it and said, "This is why we don't deal with her." It was another quiet reminder that things with Mom never really changed. Evan's luck started turning after that. He'd been the golden child for years, but college scouts didn't come calling like Mom had promised. His grades dipped too low, and he lost eligibility for part of the season. He tried summer league, but without school backing him, fewer people showed up. His Civic broke down more than once. Repairs piled up, and Mom didn't have the money to cover them anymore. By the time I started my apprenticeship, Evan was working part-time at a grocery store, still talking about getting back into the game. I didn't rub it in. I didn't need to. Watching him go from the center of attention to just another guy bagging groceries was enough. Mom's situation wasn't better. She bounced between jobs, couldn't hold one longer than a few weeks. Every time I saw her, she had a new story about why it wasn't her fault.
Bad boss, unfair rules, bad timing.
She never mentioned the late arrivals or the missing cash drawers people whispered about. Eventually, she moved in with a friend full-time. Word around town was she owed money to almost everyone she knew. For me, things lined up. The apprenticeship paid steady and I kept my expenses low. I fixed my old truck piece by piece until it ran smooth. Dad and my stepmom helped me line up night classes so I could work toward a certification. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. The best part was the quiet. No yelling about missing money, no favoritism hanging over every meal. No photo wall with lopsided frames, just steady rules and clear expectations. A few months after graduation, I ran into Evan at the gas station again. He looked worn down, uniform polo half untucked. He nodded. I nodded back. This time he said, "It's different now, huh?" I said, "Yeah." He didn't add anything else. Later that week, Mom texted asking for money again. She said, "I know you're doing well. Families should help each other." I typed out a reply and erased it. Instead, I sent back, "I can't." She didn't answer. Over time, those messages slowed down. She still showed up on social media, posting old photos of Evan like he was still in high school, calling him her star. But in real life, he was just another guy trying to get hours at a grocery store. I didn't feel sorry for them. They'd made their choices. Mom had burned through money, trust, and chances. Evan had coasted on being golden until the world stopped clapping. Karma didn't crash down all at once, it just chipped away until they were left standing in the same place they'd started without the spotlight. I kept moving forward. My routine was simple: work, classes, fixing the truck, saving cash, no drama, no excuses. The kind of life Dad had tried to teach me from the start. The last time I saw Mom was at the diner one Sunday morning. She was sitting with her friend, hair messy, counting change on the table to pay for coffee. She didn't see me. I walked out without saying anything. The last time I saw Evan was outside the grocery store loading carts in the rain. He saw me drive by in the truck and gave a half wave. I nodded. That was it. Graduation had been the marker. But the real shift was everything after. I had a path, even if it wasn't glamorous. They had excuses. That was the difference. I didn't need revenge, and I didn't need to prove anything. Their lives told the story on their own. Mom begging for 20s. Evan stuck in place. Dad steady with a new house and a wife who didn't put up with lies. Me with my own truck, my own plan, and my own rules taped to the fridge. The golden child wasn't golden anymore. The scapegoat wasn't carrying anyone else's weight. That was enough.